I'm Monica Neubauer
And I'm Mark Neubauer.
with an open conversation. Yay. All
Yeah.
right. In our first episode, we talked about our journey and how we developed conversation and the importance of conversation in our relationship. And we were thinking about and talking to a friend who kind of said, well, how do you start the conversation? What if you've lived together or you've been married, for 10 years and you
Yeah.
haven't been used to having conversation? How do you jump into that? You don't get to where we are. We want to show you the end result of what a joy it is to have lots of conversation.
Yeah. And that's, in the conversation that I had with someone recently, we talked about how much practice is part of having conversations. You need to practice it.
Just like everything else, you need to do it to
Yeah.
improve in it.
Yeah.
If you're not used to having conversation, you're not just going to step in and have these amazing communication skills.
Right.
Yeah. So it needs to be developed. So we want to talk about how can you develop that? And you can develop this with your spouse or your significant other, with your children, at work. Is there somebody at work that you're having trouble communicating with? Some of these things we're going to talk about today could help you improve your relationship with them as well.
Yes.
All right. Let's start light. What when somebody says to someone they want to have more conversation, let's have some conversation. And that sounds a little bit awkward, but let's even say you enter it with intention. I mean, let's just go with that. Why are you laughing?
I'm not, I was thinking about the one conversation started that men hate is we need to talk. Like nothing will make a husband
less
feel
willing,
fear.
feel fear, or less willing to talk.
Stock market drops 1,000 points today. Nah, we'll come back up. We need to talk. Fear.
Okay, so let's start with that. If the woman says, I want to have more conversation, how should she approach? Or either, there's going to be plenty of men who are more chatty and want to have a conversation. So the person who wants to institute the conversation, how should they? Because I mean, that's good because we're speaking from I'm the extrovert who loves to have conversation and you grew into it. So how would you advise someone like me to draw someone like you into conversation?
Well, let's start with the fact that one of your love languages is quality time.
Right.
So I think that that really became the foundation stone for us having a conversation because if neither husband or wife has that need, it might not be that a felt need is a felt need.
Well, that's true. If you have two introverts,
right. And you know that good conversation will help your marriage, then yeah, start light. And you have to agree on it. Like you can't just the wife or it's usually going to be the wife, isn't it?
well,
The wife,
often, but I mean, I know some pretty socially gregarious men who like
that's
to have
true
good
that they would prefer.
conversation.
They would,
And
yeah,
even you, as someone who's developed into conversation, let's say you meet a new friend and you like that friend and you want to spend more time with them on some conversation, but you need to get to know them first.
right. Well, for me, small talk is just not a thing. I just
Yeah, that's true.
it's just hard for me. It's hard for me to talk about light and surfacey things when there's so many good deep things to talk about.
Lord, let's get deep stuff.
That's right. I'd much prefer doing deep dives, and that's literally that's how you get to know people the best. You don't get to know people if every time you get together with them you're just talking about cars and hunting and and
Okay, let's
sports.
let's talk about or interior decorating. That's kind of the one that the
Yeah.
women's social
Yeah.
conversation that I have not too much to engage with.
Yeah.
um, when somebody wants to have a conversation, and there are some concepts. It's like, oh, you want me to talk about my dreams? Well, no, you don't have to talk about dreams. That sometimes scares people too because they may not know what their dreams are, or they might be afraid to share them publicly. Some of the things that we feel are deep. And so to even enter into them with those key phrases that might make someone uncomfortable
Yeah.
is a wrong way. So let's talk about starting light. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a difference between starting light and small talk. We just dropped a few topics of.
Right.
So let's take an example though. Let's take an example of the dream conversation. And you're starting light. And if you don't know what questions to ask, we are offering on our blog a downloadable book of questions, or you can, they have some at the gift shops, little boxes of questions and things like that. So you get a list of questions to help you think. And you start with some of the lighter ones. Like let's say here's a question that would be light, that's not necessarily surfacey, would be would you rather go up in a balloon or jump out of an airplane?
Yeah.
Now, some people are going to say, well, I don't want to do either.
I'd say yes.
Right? Yeah. When do I go? um, right. So, right there can open a conversation about uh, how adventurous people are, how much risk takers they are, um, fun dreams. We're not digging into deep things, but yeah, or bucket list kind of items. What are things I'd like to do in life? It starts with something that's a little bit outrageous, but not crazy.
Yeah.
It's not, and it's also not cheap, but it's also not too expensive. So, you talk about something that's within reach of people that might be interesting.
Yeah.
Sometimes you start with these big, broad questions that are just hard for people to wrap their mind around. One of them is like, well, what would you do if you won the lottery?
Yeah.
Well, geez, oh, Pete. I mean, and we've talked about that. So
How much are we talking?
but that doesn't lead to as much intimate conversation because it's so unlikely to happen that people they just have a hard time going there. So pick something that's light, but maybe outside of the realm of your normal day.
Yeah.
Or maybe you had a great conversation with somebody that day. Hey, I had a great conversation with so and so, and we talked about this. And what do you think about that? Not necessarily from a potential standpoint to talk about them or their situation. We don't want to open the door necessarily to have like a gossip session, but it's like, oh, this was really interesting with them. It's really interesting that they're doing that. What if we did that, or would we like that? Or it just open some doors with different questions.
Yeah.
All right. Start with, if you're going to do this intentionally, start with like a 15-minute time commitment. Let's say one of you is uncomfortable about having it. You're both willing to enter into just having some conversation. Now, remember, this is just relaxed conversation that we're having. So we're not talking about our day. We're not talking about the painful things or complaining about the kids or even any kind of complaining. It's conversation for fun and learning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a thought on that? Kind of looked like something was brewing there.
No, just that I don't know that I would put so many parameters around.
No, you're
just,
right.
Just because if they need to be talking about some of these things, then just go ahead and talk about them. Just be careful to not, if feelings escalate, just be sensitive to those things. That
Take that.
Just
Just
take a pause.
take a pause.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and maybe that is it. Maybe people can set up a time where at the end of the day, I mean, I've heard some various examples. And if you have young children, all of this shifts a little bit, but we have so many people working at home now and so many people who are having different kinds of schedules that maybe you can schedule some conversation time in the morning after your coffee or while you're having coffee, or maybe right after dinner, that's like homework time or TV time for your kids or something, and you take a half an hour and talk right then if that's what feels good to you. So,
well, we're busy, like you're busy or I'm busy around dinner time, so it's literally the evening hours are the best for us because you're just doing so much.
well, and I'm more relaxed then.
Yeah.
But we
yeah,
have some talk in the morning sometimes too, and
Yeah.
we take a walk together.
yeah.
But we talk about different things at different time of day, but we've kind of developed that. So just find a time. And, I appreciate what you said. If somebody, maybe you need to talk about your days more because you don't do that.
Yeah.
You don't know what each other does or how you spend your time or whatever.
One spouse travels a lot, sometimes those times
That is true.
to connect.
Because when you travel a lot,
But we even do it. I mean, we even try to connect pretty regularly, even when you're traveling.
on the phone.
On
But
the phone.
again, we've trained that, and your phone conversations are different than person to person.
Right.
Some people might have better conversations on the phone.
Yeah. You never know.
You never know. And if you're going to take a date, bring some of these questions with you.
Yeah.
Again, whether you take a date with a spouse or maybe you take a kid date and you're going to ask some questions with your children, or you're out with a friend, don't be afraid to bring these questions if you're not quite sure what to talk about.
Yeah.
They're always good. Now you look like you.
I'm not-
It looks like you've swallowed a smile or something. He's sitting over there.
I was just saying, that's like one of our fears is going on a date and eating and then not like sitting there and not talking. Like, oh my gosh, we're
We're
that
that
couple.
couple.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, they've been married for 45 years and they have nothing left to say to each other. And I will say we've been married 33 years and occasionally we don't have much to say, but
But I
then
totally don't mind bringing some questions that
on a
some
date,
random
right?
questions on a date. I
Yep.
mean, that's totally legit. I'd rather do that than sit in silence, I think. So,
Well, I think also the other thing that provides good conversation for us is podcasts. You listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts.
Yeah.
We both have a learner's mindset. So, right now I'm reading Atomic Habits by James Clear, and I'm working on a couple of my habits. So we're having some conversations at our house about habits. And we come in and out of it. We don't just sit down and say, oh, we got to solve this habits problem. Well, no, it's just about, is there something here we can use?
right.
So we
Exactly.
use the tool where we're learning. We use those tools to bring conversation into our house. Okay, we were just talking about picking a good time of day. When are you busy, and are you tired? Mark has his pain journey, so in the afternoon we don't have serious conversation in the afternoon.
Yeah.
You're usually a little bit better in the evening. So if somebody's uncomfortable, that's not a good time to have a
I was
conversation.
just thinking about a good thing that we could have started with was that, when we see people who have problems in their marriages,
Yeah.
half the time it's just communication failure.
Yeah.
It's just communication breakdown. They're just not talking about stuff.
They're not talking and they're not listening.
And they're not listening. They're not talking about their feels. So,
Feelings.
so, um, I wanted to throw that out there because that's really a goal. Like if you want to have a good relationship with anybody, not just your spouse, good conversation is and good communication, learning how to communicate is really
It's completely true. And when I teach classes on the harmony and flow of life, where we talk about I got work going on, and when I speak to real estate agents who their lives are completely out of control, at the whim of clients, and we talk about where to find some harmony and smooth sailing in that. Sometimes they've not been talking to each other and they don't even recognize it. Self-employed people, entrepreneurial types, get so focused on creating goals for their business, and they don't recognize that they can create goals for their family, for their personal life. You can improve your relationship with your spouse. You can improve your relationship with your children. How do you do it? And conversation is a good starting point for most of them. So yeah, that's a really good point. And one of the other things we learned, one of our Bible study teachers used to say this to us all the time. And everybody kind of knows that in many religious structures, there are dogmatisms and people study and they think they're right. And so the Bible study was the perfect context for this comment, but it goes into so many more areas of our life. And so we'll give credit to Joan Del Brock for being the one who introduced us to this phrase. What? Tell them.
No, what is it? I was curious.
You're curious.
Yeah.
You're the
I
one
don't
who
know what-
reminded me to say it.
Oh, which
It's
is
better.
To be loving than to be right. I didn't know that was Joan Del Brock. Oh,
Yeah.
good on you, Joan Del.
And yeah, she said it. And when I was in the daytime Bible study in yours as well, she would always say that. She would remind us as we do study and as we learn to grow together, it's better to be loving than right.
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
Well, I guess my journey with that is that, especially in my younger years, I was just highly logical in my thinking and didn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about feelings or, what do I feel or why do I feel what I feel,
You lived in an objective world, not in a subjective world.
Yes. Thinking that, it had to,
There's a right and a wrong way to do
a right
things.
and a wrong way to do everything. And oh boy.
Here I've been spending all these years thinking I'm the only one who thinks that way.
Yeah.
I mean, because
Well,
that was totally, yeah, go ahead.
well, there comes a point where you really have to, if you have a position that you feel strongly about, and you're trying to communicate that position to someone else, if you don't need to argue it. I mean, you just throw it out there. It's about having a conversation. That's not about having an argument, I guess. And
This, ladies and gentlemen, is why we've started an open conversation, because Mark came from his areas where he felt right. I came from areas where I felt right. And through conversation, we've learned to realize that there's
yeah,
so many other factors
yeah.
to what is right and what is good. And
I think the journey of aging and learning, being a lifelong learner, is that you literally, the more you learn, the less you find out you know.
well, and
Yeah,
the less right I feel all the time. I
yeah,
begin to realize eh, that there's so many other ways to think and other ways to view things than what I see. So I love how you just shared, you grew up, you had your certain way of logic and ways
yeah,
you viewed things, and you thought that was the right way.
right.
And so when I would do something different,
Yeah, go ahead.
how
I can
did
take it now.
when I did something you didn't agree with, you thought I was wrong.
Right. And so the right. So to get back to the answer of your question,
Okay.
what does it mean to be
To
loving instead of always having to hold fast to a position? That
right.
there comes a time where if if your position is causing someone angst and anger, and back off. I mean,
There must be something
there's
for
no
you to learn there to have
right,
a sensitivity into a situation.
right.
Yeah.
I'd
Okay.
rather walk away,
I'd
from a conversation and still be friends and love someone, and disagree with them, than feel like I need to just absolutely defend my position.
right. Sometimes it's better to just walk away in disagreement and let
Mhm.
everybody live in their
Yeah,
space. Yeah.
yeah,
And that's what it is to be loving. We don't have to convince people to come to see things the way we do. With that being said, transitioning now into feelings. Feelings.
yeah.
Okay. Mark and I have had several rounds of therapy in our married life. Things would get hard. We needed some help. And one of those rounds, we met with a therapist. I can't remember his name right now, but if we think of it.
Charlie.
Yes, Charlie Newman.
Mm.
We like to give credit to all these wonderful people in our lives who've given us a gift. So Charlie Newman was the one who said, you need to learn to express your feelings, especially you.
Yeah, yeah,
That one was mostly on this one.
yeah.
Make no mistake, I've had my share of things in this too, but that one was on you
Right,
because you are an introvert.
right. And well, and the older I get, the more I'm recognizing how uh, feelings drive thoughts, and thoughts drive feelings,
Feelings drive thoughts.
and thoughts drive feelings.
Yeah.
So they're not. It's not a one or the other. It's not like you can say. The reason why that's important is sometimes you have to uncover the feeling if you really want to figure out
What you're trying to
the
say,
reason
or
why
to
you're
have some
thinking.
understanding, even.
Yeah,
We talk about this in the real estate context of when you're negotiating with another party. I'm the agent, I have a client, there's another agent, another client, and we all want something, but we don't agree. There's a little bit of, not necessarily even contentiousness, but there's disagreement. And sometimes when we have some understanding of the story, like this person will say, oh, I don't want to let the seller stay in their house after closing because I had a terrible experience with that before, and the seller wrecked that house when they were staying in the house. So this person has this strong feeling because this, and this person has this need because this. Once we understand the backstories, well, then we can find another road out of the journey. And that's the same with talking together is I need to teach you how I feel and show you things about my journey. So not necessarily so you can help me out of it, but so we can have understanding of each other and increase sensitivity, maybe find a new road somewhere
yeah,
out. We may think we're going this direction, but for some reason that's causing one of us pain. We need to try and figure out why it's causing us pain or fear or whatever, because there may be another solution that's great. But until we can identify those feelings, we're not going to be able to readjust a direction.
Yeah.
Okay, at this point, though, I want to say having these conversations about feelings are hard and they take time to develop. And I'm going to give you a tool here in just a second, but they take time to develop. And remember at the beginning, we said start with the light things. Once you develop a better set of skills to converse and learn to express yourself and use more words and use more expressive language, then when you get to the feelings conversation, there's been more relational capital built up.
Yeah.
And we feel like, okay, I'm starting to understand more about how you communicate and I can trust you with more feeling language.
Right. And that's what I was saying earlier this morning when we were talking, was that, it's,
You mean earlier this morning before we got on the podcast?
yes,
Yeah.
before that, that it's really helpful for me to think about, because I'm an internal processor, to think about what I'm feeling and why I'm feeling it on a regular basis, because then in conversations with you, there's, I never have that fear point anymore. Like when Monica will say, we need to talk, there's never this, I'm like, all right, what are we
What are we
talking
gonna
about?
talk about? Imagine that, being excited to have conversations together.
Well, and sometimes even once you get adept at having those conversations, sometimes the harder conversations are even the better conversations. It's like,
They're going to get you farther somewhere, get you
Right.
somewhere you want to go.
I'm going to learn something and we're going to move forward. Something's going to happen. Something good's going to happen,
Yeah.
instead of this fear of, something bad's about to happen.
So you're learning, you process internally. So as you have learned to understand your feelings,
Right.
and one of the things that Charlie gave us, and these are available, I think we mentioned this in another episode,
Yeah,
even
yeah.
about the feelings chart.
Yeah.
Get a chart to help you identify your feelings. But I love how, I'm an external processor. So the conversation helps me understand my feelings. I love, though, that you spend time thinking about it and you ask yourself questions.
You're right.
I'm feeling pain or fear or disappointment. And then you ask
Right.
Mark asks himself,
Yeah.
why do I feel this disappointment? And you process it internally. And then when you
Yeah.
come to the conversation, you can say, I've thought about this and I think this is why, or this is how we engage that
Yeah.
created this, and
Right.
yada, yada.
I want to step just a little bit away from feelings to some of when you have conversations about current issues, like,
If you're going to talk about politics and coronavirus.
or, please.
As
But
you probably will do.
I wanted to throw this out there early on, because this is really, really, really helpful for me and has been, and it's the language of current working theory.
Oh, yeah.
So in order to protect yourself from being a dogmatic jerk on your positions on things, one of the things that's been helpful for me is a good friend. Can I mention his name?
Yeah, I think as long as we're talking about our friends in nice languages,
Languages.
which they wouldn't be our friends.
Ben Metz, he introduced me to this language, and it's been so helpful. And that is, when you're processing an issue in your head, you're trying to think through. I mean, there's been some big, like LGBTQ issues, that we've spent
Years.
20 years better, just chewing that one apart. But we try to keep it in terms of, this is my current working theory. In other words, I'm not saying this is how it is. This is the black and white truth of it all.
Right.
This is what I've seen, what I've experienced, what I've learned, and this is my current working theory. In other words, this is what I currently believe about it, and I'm holding it open in an open hand, because
You could put some more things in it.
I can put more things in it, and I can take things away from it.
Right.
You can't take stuff away from this.
Right.
You can't put things in this.
Right.
But you can with this.
With this.
So, and for anybody that's just listening, I was opening and closing my hand.
Yeah,
So I
right.
forgot that some people might just listen to. So
Oh, right. Yeah, you had your hands open with your current working theory. You have the open hand.
open-handed,
Yeah.
just keep an open hand and keep learning. Like don't don't go to this place of well, this is I've learned everything there's to learn about this, done. This is how it is.
Yeah.
It's uh, I'm open for new.
This is where I am now. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm open to hear somebody's story. I'm open to hear another side of it. I'm
Yeah.
open to learn some new things, and that's so crucial in the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my current working theory. Oh, I was going to say, how we've kind of mentioned some of our friends who've been a blessing to us. I want to say that I want to recognize how important it has been to us to have friends who also have conversation. We've learned these things through people who are invested in encouraging conversation in other people, and we listen to them. So we didn't, all the wisdom, I hope it's wisdom that we're sharing, it's not something we've learned all by ourselves.
Right.
We've learned by having conversations with other people, and we hear
Right.
what they say, and they give us new language to take into our conversation, like the current
Yeah.
working theory, like new emotions.
Yeah.
And so we pay attention when our wise friends give us suggestions for how to communicate better.
That's a good point because, if you're getting kind of stuck, just you and your spouse or your
Right.
partner, and make some friends or invite some people over that are more adept at this than you are, and
Yeah, or go out for dinner and say, we want to learn some new conversation skills,
Yeah.
or, we need some new
Yeah.
thoughts on these kinds of things. So, yeah. And
Yeah.
hopefully we'll give you some of those even as we continue on. But we want to acknowledge we didn't create all of these things, and we did
Yeah.
not develop good conversation in a vacuum.
Yeah, I think we listed this one too. Is that don't ask questions that can be answered with a single word.
Right. We talked about that
Yeah.
in the first episode, right? No, yes or no, or single answer questions.
Right.
Right. You need to ask questions that are open ended, that encourage conversation. Also, when you're talking about your feelings, and this is a big therapist thing, so you might have heard this is pretty common, but use I phrases.
Yeah.
I feel lonely when you travel all the time. So let's get a dog.
Yeah, I'm a big
Yeah.
violator of this one. You have to continually remind me of it, but I'm appreciative of it when you do. So
We need to use the I phrases. I feel.
yeah.
And even if you say, when you do this, I feel this,
Yeah.
not you made me feel
Yeah.
this way.
Yeah.
I feel disappointed when you show up for dinner late all the time. I mean, that's not our
Yeah.
story, but that, if somebody's always late for dinner, I feel disappointed. Well, okay, then we need a new system. So let's talk about that. So rather than whoever's late for dinner feeling assaulted all the time, oh, I can't get out of work or whatever. Okay, well, then we need a new dinner time, or we need a new system, because I feel disappointed that this repeated thing keeps happening. So this is kind of good therapy language.
Yep.
All right. I think, that's the thing about taking time to learn about yourself.
Yeah.
I think we can close with a little bit more of this concept. When we are willing to learn about ourselves, when we can be humble enough to say, I don't have to be right, or I don't have all the information,
Yeah.
or I care about you enough to hear your opinion on this,
Yeah.
even if I don't like it. Those are really important steps in having good conversation. Let's close with this idea that you were kind of bringing up about spending time to learn about yourself, where you think in your mind, okay, who am I? How am I feeling? That connotes a humility, where I say, I am willing to be wrong. I am willing to acknowledge that I don't know everything.
Yes.
I care about you enough to hear your opinion and your side of things.
Yeah.
So if we're going to come about this with a prideful I'm right attitude, we're not going to have good conversation.
No.
So it has to come from a place of I want to learn. I'm opening the door to hear more about you because I care about you, because I'm curious about you, because I'm interested in you. It's that acknowledgement that I want to know more.
Yeah.
I want to know more generally, but I want to know more about you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then developing the skills to do that.
Right.
Because sometimes we can say, I want to do that, but we still feel our old habits of communication or we have those reactionary things. We're all aware of the term triggers.
Yeah.
We have reactionary things to terms or to tones of voice that people talk with us. And it's about pulling back on that and recognizing, okay, I'm overreacting to that. It's kind of like what you said, the phrase.
Yeah. It's better to be lying than to be right.
No, the other one, honey, we need to talk.
Oh, that.
You're going to realize that, honey, we need to talk. Oh, good. What are we going to talk about?
Yeah.
Rather than,
Yeah.
oh no,
Yeah.
what are we going to
Oh,
talk about?
no.
All right. Do you have a final word to leave our listeners on how to start having conversation when you want to kind of
I did have something and it just flew away like a little bird.
like a little bird?
Um,
Let me say one thing while you're thinking of it, see if it comes back. I was also thinking about when you're having conversation with children and your children, that has a lot of emotion in it. And I think what's really important with having conversation with your children is creating safe space.
Yeah.
And when I say safe space, I just mean not busy space, like dates where you're totally focused on them, or even a coffee date at home or something. So when
Yeah.
you're with your kids, it's not so much about, oh, let's have a conversation and they're going to change the way they communicate with you.
Yeah.
It's about just creating that not busy focus space with them.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
agree?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember what I was.
Okay, good. Wrap us up.
Um, this is an important one, but it's also, again, it's a very practice skill, and so once you get better at it, you'll get better at
Right.
it, and it won't be a danger zone. But when you're having conversation, anytime you hear someone escalate their voice, or that there's a lot more feels behind what they just said than what they communicated, take a note of it, even if you have to write it down and go back to it, because that's where you really learn about people and really learn what's important to them and what they're struggling with. Is that, even a simple thing can just listen for those.
Listen for those. If it's somebody you care about and you want to get to know, make a note of it. Is there a good time to come back and talk about it? Is it time to shut down the conversation
Right.
because
Exactly
they're
right. That's a
feeling that?
really
or
good point. Like
you
if
can tell
it's-
it's not going to go
Right.
any better. It's
Or-
not going to get better from here.
Right. It could, yeah. There's definitely a time that's totally okay to end a conversation and say, let's let that one steep for a little bit
And
come
even,
back to it.
come back to it, or you can make
And-
an appointment, or you can not make an
and it
appointment.
can be
just-
permission
yeah.
based. And when you
Yep.
want to when you want to come back to this, I'm willing to listen, but no yelling.
That actually, we'll talk about how to deal with conflict maybe in another episode. But you just gave me one good thought, another one if you're new at conversation and maybe you're the person who's eager to have the conversation and your spouse is not as eager to have the conversation, give them permission to say, okay, this is enough.
Yeah. Yes.
The person who is struggling to have the conversation, they need to have an outward or, something that just says, I got a break,
Right.
or, okay, enough for now.
Yeah.
Some kind of phrase between the two of you that says, I'm done for now. Let's come back together. Because
And
we
it-
want to appreciate everybody's willingness to step up and have conversation, but we also need to appreciate when they feel like this is going somewhere I'm not ready to go,
Yeah.
or I need to take another path, whatever they feel.
Yeah. And if they're tapping out too often, you might need some counseling. It's totally cool.
That's a good
Whatever.
phrase. If they're tapping out too often, and I love that from the series Alone, I'm tapping out.
Yeah.
If the people need to tap out, give them space. But yeah, if you're tapping out all the time, and what we call therapy sometimes, maybe we need an interpreter.
Yes.
Sometimes it's deeper and you need to deal with things in your life, but other times we just need some
Yeah.
help understanding each other. We speak different languages.
That's it.
All right.
All righty.
Thanks for joining us.